Hey everybody, so we are live, and just before we jump into the interview here, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds explaining how it's going to work. I do have a scripted set of questions that I'm going to go through with our guest, and then once we get to the end of those, I will verbally announce when it's time for you to start typing out your viewer questions. But without further ado, hello everybody. My name is Mark Allard-Will, and I'll be your host today. But as you can see, I am not alone. I'm joined all the way from Kitchener, Ontario, by Alfonso Espinos of Studio Comics Press. Alfonso,
Hello.
can I ask you to introduce both yourself and your work to the viewers, please?
Absolutely, my friend. And before anything, Mark, thank you very much for the invitation. I gotta say, like I've been watching your live feeds from time to time. You seem to have like a lot of talent coming through your show, and this is pretty exciting to be here right now. As you know, or for whoever doesn't know me, my name is Alfonso Espinos. I'm pretty much sitting down here at Studio Comics Press at the Central Studio Comics Press, where pretty much we do everything comics, from printing to drawing them to everything, to creating them.
Awesome, thank you
I
very
don't know.
much.
Do I need more introduction?
If you'd like to, but we're going to
Yeah,
touch upon a lot more of that stuff as we go through the interview as well, so no pressure.
fantastic. Well, then, yeah, father
Uh,
of one, husband of one, um, Mexican, born Mexican and Canadian for now 13 years. 14.
oh, awesome. I'm happy
Oh,
to join
yeah.
you. I became a citizen last year, so I'm very happy to join you as a Canadian. Um,
It's such an amazing feeling though when you finally get identify yourself with a country such as Canada, who has um, standards such as us. I think it's pretty awesome to be proud of being Canadian. So then I'm really proud to be Mexican. I'm also really proud to be Canadian, and it's an amazing feeling.
I'm 100% with you there. I'll never forget the ceremony day. One of the most amazing experiences of my life. Yeah,
Yeah,
wonderful. Absolutely
yeah.
wonderful. So before we delve into questions about printing comic books, I want to
Mhm.
focus on kind of the legacy that comic books have now gained from TV and media. So a lot of popular TV shows such as AMC's Comic Book Men have made comic book shops look really glamorous to the public in recent years. But what I want to
Mhm.
ask you is this, what's the reality of selling comic books in today's world?
The reality of selling comic books nowadays, today, um, I have seen so many people making statements such as like comic books now they're not going to be the same as they used to before. Comic books are not selling as much now. You got to do graphic novels. I think personally that creating comic books nowadays is as easy as creating comic books back in the day in them, because it's pretty much you just go on your favorite media, paper, computer, tablet, whatever media you want, you start creating the comic books nowadays. I think that it's even more interesting to see all the content that is really happening, because the real stories are out there, right? Like nowadays with this pandemic things, I guess that science fiction finally reached the reality, and that's the point where all comic book creators get a little bit of a wow point, because it's like something that you always read on comic books is happening in real life, right? So then creating comic books is fantastic. The stories are endless. The business part of creating comic books is the one that gets a little bit tricky, right? And it's something that you don't learn of this reality of the business part of creating the comics until you are right deep into it, right? So it's a learning curve that has taken me about like 23 years now. So it's like about 23 years, and it's pretty fantastic to see that we're here sitting down with you, talking to you, like seeing all the people on the other side who is watching, like Braden. Hi, Braden.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, as you covered in your introduction there, you print
Yeah,
comic books as well at Studio Comics Press in Kitchener.
yeah,
In these interviews, I've asked a lot of writers and artists to give advice to newcomers about creating their own comic books. But what I want to ask you is this: as a printer, what advice would you give to new comic book creators looking to print their first comic book?
Creating your first comic book, it never has to be a challenge though. It has to be fun, and that's where um, most of comic book creators, I think that there's the starting point. I mean, at least for when you start creating a comic book, the one main thing is like you need to have fun. You need to really put emotion into that comic book, right? Emotion gets transported from the paper to the readers, and most of the times when the readers finally get the book, they can actually feel that readership throughout the words, throughout the graphics, even the time that you put towards creating every single page. um, Creating comic books, it's always a really awesome form of communication. And don't be afraid. I just jump. I have seen many guys. We have an example of a really young kid, 7 years old, 7 or 8. Now he's supposed to be like around 9 years old. He goes by oh my, oh, I forgot his name, but he's 9 years old. Uh, we here at the office we sell something called the Create Your Own Comic Book Kit, and this one is pretty much a blank comic book with a blank pages in it. And this kid one day walk in, says, "I want to get one of those things." Mom, of course, paid for. Now, 2 weeks later, he came back with the book completely finished from beginning to end. Says, "I want to see my comic book. I finished my comic book. Now I want it printed. I want a few copies." So then, just for that day, seeing that a kid with 9 years old was fearless to actually produce a comic book, put it together, and have it out, it was just a fantastic way, right? So, and I mean, the art is not a Jack Kirby art. It's not nothing like overly crazy, but just the effort to put the comic book together was just fantastic to see happening. And that's the one thing that I would recommend to all the comic book creators over there. Don't be afraid of creating your comic book. Don't be afraid of showing it to people, right? And that's the starting point, right?
Absolutely. And so something that so we're going to change gears completely now. Um,
Yeah.
so something that will be known to Canadian comic book fans is you're also somewhat of a movie star. You also starred alongside many others in the Canadian comic book movie Heroes Manufactured, and I'm wondering if you can tell us what that experience was like of being involved in that movie.
Here's Manufacture was a really fun project that we started together. Jerome Betan, myself, Sabosh, as well. There was people involved over there at the beginning, right at the beginning of creating Here's Manufacture. Um, it was just such a fun ride, just to explore and most of it see how one full year of creating and promoting comic books goes in spring, right? Um, we have more plans to put together this series in more content that we created. We have plans to put together more content on the series. However, that first film, what we try to do is like show the struggles in different areas for comic book creators, such as like, well, myself. I mean, first when I moved to Canada here, that 14 years ago, I will have to start from the beginning, right? So then I will have to start promoting my comic books. I probably knew, or they probably knew a little bit of my work in Mexico and stuff like that. But then right here, start from the beginning, start putting it together, creating comic books, creating a new market. And the most important thing is that I have I have this goal to make sure that the comic books need to be read, right? That's the main goal. Comic books need to be read, and you need to know, well, more than you need. You really want to know how a comic book gets created. So then we try to create that part of Here's Manufacture where creating the comic books is an important part also as reading the comic books. But we have a saying here at the office that says that you create your comic book, that only covers half the way because you now you have to promote it, right? Like such as like going in social media, do interviews like these ones, let people know what is in there, and that's the other part of doing comic books. Um, This is a few of the things that we try to cover within the Here's Manufacture movie. I mean, there is such a huge market, creators, comics, titles, events that happen every year, or it used to happen every year before the pandemic, but it's still happening online. But there is so hard to cover all of them. So then we try to cover a big overview in this first film, in this first part of the film, and then now the following films they have a different aspects of like how to create more specific content, how to do different type of areas and printing, and it's just fun. It's just an ongoing. And as a for media personality, I never. I never find myself in the media of famous. You think I don't? I don't think I'm famous at all. I think the only thing that I do is work. I just wake up and start working, be with the family, of course, my daughter, my wife, do things with friends, and then go back to work, right? So that's what we do in order to if you want a recommendation for comic book creators, do the same work, working your comics, right?
Awesome. Thank you very much. So something that we've kind of given a well-rounded picture of already in this interview is that you are someone who wears many hats in the comic book industry. So as well as being a comic book shop and print owner, you're also like we discussed there, you're a printer. You're also a writer and an illustrator, having created your own comic book series called The Night Spike, amongst many others. Can you tell us a little bit more about The Night Spike, please?
Absolutely. I think I sent you some of them. Tell me that you have read the Night Spike. Have you?
Yep, yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I believe you sent a signed copy to of issue one to Elaine and myself.
Night Spike is a it originally born back 1993, the first time that I published Night Spike back in Mexico City, where I was publishing it. The whole idea was a group of teenagers that they were always like joking, kind of like doing those really crazy jokes in within each other, and then somehow they become superheroes, and then from there they start saving the world, but they never goes right every time they try to save the world, right? So that was the original draft of the Night Spike. As years progress, Spike and Bell start to growing and they start taking their own personality to the point that now they are basically two superheroes that they don't have any superpowers, but they are always trying to save the world. They're always trying to achieve that super heroic idea of being a superhero, right? And we're talking about when this guy created these characters back 1993, 1992. We're looking at all the superheroes that you used to read in comic books. They used to be, tall. They used to be tall. They used to be handsome. Everything goes right with these comic books. If they have a problem, they used to be another superhero, even more handsome than the one that had a trouble, and came around and saved them. With Night Spike, Spike and Bell, both characters, they it's the complete opposite to it. You have superheroes that they have no superpowers, they have no superhero abilities. They're always trying to save the world. They never achieve it, and everything with a little touch of comedic, mixed Mexican humor in it, and you get the Night Spike, right? Um, I like it. I like drawing it. I've been doing it for the longest time, and then it's great. So I have a few here. I mean, not because I say it's great, but I like it. Um, it's this is a cover of number zero that zero the new beginning of the Night Spike. But as well, we have right now the Night Spike Genesis that kind of like covers the right here. I'm going to show it right there. It has the cover of the original comic that was published in 1996. That was when we officially published it there as a publishing company. Um, so this book right here compiles those three issues of the origins of the Night Spike, um, printed back in 1996, and they're really, really good. Well, I did it.
No, I love it.
Uh,
It reminds me of a comic book that I did actually called Saskatchewan. Did I ever send you a copy of that?
yes, fantastic, Gary. We need to
Yeah,
do a crossover with those guys.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, do a comedy superhero thing. That would be awesome. So that is the end of my scripted questions for today. So viewers, please start
No.
typing your viewer questions in, and I'll read those out to Alfonso. But while you're typing those out, I will just let you know that Heroes Manufactured, the movie that we discussed, you can find that on Amazon's Prime Video. The Night Spike, there is a link where you can preview and purchase that in the description of this live video. And there's also a link to the website for Studio Comics Press in the description of this live video. So got some comments already, not questions just yet, but comments. We've got Braden has said, hello Alfonso, Studio Comics Press is top notch.
Braden, like always, this is one of the things. And with that, sorry to interrupt you. I don't mean to interrupt you, but then
Oh, no
stay
worries.
there on the screen also. Don't go.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that I have learned with Studio Comics, with the actual print shop. I mean, we put the print shop, we established right here at the location on the print shop about 3 years ago now. And one thing that I have learned is that the amazing talent that Canada has when it comes to creating comic books, and all this talent you don't really know until you actually have the reach to it. And one of the persons that I didn't know how talented they were until I seeing the work coming in, Braden, he has a book called, if I'm not mistaken, called Prehistoria, The Age of the Dinosaurs. And the art is just fabulous. One of the things that I love myself is to see black and white art. He does fantastic. I mean, the book, if you haven't seen Braden Martin's Prehistoria, Age of the Dinosaurs, you gotta check it out. And it's just great. And I think it's a Kickstarter happening right now, so then support his Kickstarter as well.
Yeah, he
Thank
is
you,
a
Brandon.
phenomenal artist from Martinsville, like just outside of Saskatoon here. No, Humboldt.
Absolutely.
Humboldt.
Yes.
Yeah, so very close to us here because I'm in Saskatoon here. But so then we've got another comment here from Elaine, and she says, "I have mad respect for anyone that creates comics. It's really hard. I think a lot of people don't realize how hard it is until they try for themselves."
Elaine, thank you for the comment, Elaine. Another great comic book creator. Um, Elaine is the last. What's the name of your title, Elaine? Is the last.
Oh, the last band on
Mark.
Earth.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. The Last Man on Earth. By the way, great comic book we've printed. Creating a comic book, I think back in the day when we used to go, when I used to go to talk to schools and universities back in Mexico, and they used to have that question of going over and over, how do you create your comic books, right? How do you, and there's not like an actual guide or like a book that will show you how to create a comic book. I mean, nowadays there's a lot of YouTube videos, there's a lot of guides on the technical part of like how to start a script, what's the basic rules of like panels and shots, and it's also a medium. But once again, it has to be tied into creating and really giving the comic book that soul that it needs to grow, right? So when you start creating a character and then suddenly you put this character on paper and then this character doesn't have what you are feeling that the character is supposed to have, people will read it, and of course that will determine if your character had that enough soul or not, right? And you as a comic book creator, I think that you have gone through that as well, don't you?
Yeah, there's a lot of for me as a writer, there's a lot of like existential self-doubt and all of this that comes into it, and is it going to resonate with an audience? And I think that literally happens in any narrative media, like film and books.
Exactly.
And yeah, it's just it you have to hold the course and believe in yourself, and but that's where editors can really help. They can give you that idea of what won't resonate with a reader and what will. And
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's fantastic. So we do have a question as well, another one from Elaine. What first got you into reading comics?
Elaine, what got me into reading comics? Um, Reading comics, the first comic book that I read was many years ago, like many of comic book creators and readers. I was really young. I barely remember how old I was. probably like 9, 10. I still have the book though. It was a small, tiny little book that kind of like a manga book that a local company in Mexico produced. This company, it was the name of the company that produced this book back in Mexico was Grupo Editorial BID. That is editorial group printers BID, BID, B as in Victor. These guys, what they did was they have this little Ashcan comic book with small stories of classic, funny, all this combination of different short stories of the classic comics from there was Gold Key, the ones that they used to produce these kind of comics, and I love it. I read that book many many times. Small short stories of Roadrunner, Bugs Bunny. I was a local character that was La Pequeña Lulu. Um, I mean, Popeye was on the comic as well. So you will know, right? So then that got me into reading comics. Then right after that, another science fiction movie that I love to watch over and over and over again was Terminator. Not anymore, but I used to watch that movie many, many times, and that got me into science fiction. So then, uh, between the two of them, I guess that they make more of the creating comics. There was a specific time when I finally decided creating comics. I had told that story. There was an independent comic book. There was a Canadian comic book many years ago that got into my hands, and it was just fascinating to see so much detail into the art that it got me now to reading and trying to create my own comics, to trying to perfection it, to be a little bit more better, right? But that will be for a different day. Unless you really want to know, I don't see that question.
Um, no, it's awesome. I love how some Canadian stuff, like touching on what you said there about a Canadian comic book, how some of it gets around the world, some Canadian stuff, because I'm a huge metalhead. I absolutely love heavy metal, and as in the music, not the comic book.
The comic.
Yeah, but the so there's bands like Annihilator, like massive Canadian band who are almost unknown in Canada, but around the world are huge. And I loved Annihilator growing up and still do. Absolutely love Annihilator. And came to Canada and nobody knows what I'm talking about when I say about
Yeah,
Annihilator. Yeah.
and
Um,
and those small little bands, those small little groups, or those comic books, or that writing. The important thing is like, and that happens most of the times with things that we try to recreate or copy, right? Then you see that that soul gets attached to you, right? That music, that art, that piece of creative content gets attached to you, and that's what inspires you to, well, I want to read more, or I want to listen more about this band, or what else is along the same lines that I can get to, right? So then that's what I'm talking about, like creating the soul for your comic book, right? When you create a comic book, you put that soul, you put that energy, and somebody else will read it, right? I will like it, and they will get inspired, and then 20 years later, here I am.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got another comment and a couple of
Yeah,
questions from Braden.
yeah.
He says, firstly, thanks for the kind words, guys, and he confirms that I was right the first time. He's in Martinsville, which is a bedroom community just outside of Saskatoon here. And as much as he'd like to take credit for the art, that actually belongs to his Scottish brother, Chris Simmons. Um,
Fantastic work.
and his first question is, who is your favorite comic book character and why?
Ah, they, my favorite comic book character. I guess that like in any other comic book creator, favorite comic book character was gonna be your own, right? Like the one that you created. But in a general overview, as favorite comic book character, I don't think I have one specific. I think I have a genre in general, right? When it comes to comic books, I grew up, and this is something that it gets really common in Mexico. In Mexico, comic books, or most of the line of comic books in the area or in the years that I grew up, they were based on comedy. So then, with that being said, most of the comic books that I read when I was a kid, They were mostly local. They were mostly Mexican comic book, original comic books created on in Mexico. There was a bunch of comic books, such as like Superman, Batman, the classic ones that we used to get. And most of these comics, they used to show up in Mexico delayed for maybe a month to 3 months, depending the title. So then, whatever you were reading on the United States, in Mexico they show up in Spanish, translated. 3 months with a completely different format. 3 months later, sometimes smaller one, sometimes bigger one, depending the era that you're looking at. Um, I read a lot of Batman back on the day, right? Grupo Editorial Vid or translated, and that's kind of like a little bit of the inspiration where Spike comes from, with the two spikes up. That used to be like a at the beginning, it used to be a fat version of Batman, because you have a really handsome super Batman. This is supposed to be the fat version of Batman, but again, the character starts to take in their own, um, how can I say, their own soul, their own characteristics, and then suddenly it becomes nothing of what it is, right? So then, if I have to say one character, it has to be Batman, right? The one that I used to read a lot. There used to be a lot of genres created in Mexico, but of course, comedy used to be the one that used to be the most common in it. And with that being said, comics such as like Video Risa, or El Mil Chistes, or El Chamuco, books like that that I used to read. That used to be really, really fun. That some of them is still available, some of them is still current, some of them, they doesn't exist anymore. So it's like, again, it's fun to see how all this inspirational part that I used to read back on that day, it's put now into the Night Spike, or the creations that I have. As for the second question, Braden, what are some books that you have a sentimental value? Uh, Most of the comic books that I have really sentimental value for is all the independent comic books. I think that most of my collection of comic books is based on independent comic books. And now, with having access to all the comic book creators, or like, um, actually having the comic book creators giving me access to their content for me to help them print, I've been creating right here a catalog of, I don't know, probably like 400 or 500 different titles of Canadian comic books that they've been produced between last year and this year, here, only here, right? So then I'm just thinking, like, who is talking about, like, the actual comic book industry is not working, right? So there is a lot of content. There's a lot of comic book creators there. Um, I will say one title, and I will say the title that it has sentimental value for me, and uh, most for anything for the comic, the actual comic book came to me on a really important time, if it is. It's one title from Arbard Banneheim. It's a comic book from Servus de Arbard, and one of those old titles. So incredible how things change, right? When you read a comic book, and then things start to change for that. But yeah, one comic from Servus de Arbor. That's I think it's 25, one that I have. Yep.
That's
So
awesome.
there you
I think for in Britain, actually, when I was growing up, it's very similar to what you're describing with comics in Mexico. Like a lot of the titles that I grew up with as a comic book fan as a kid were comedy comic books. So I grew up with the Beano, the Dandy. So I grew up with Dennis the Menace, the British version of Dennis the Menace. Grew up with Desperate Dan, all of those kind of things. It was fantastic. Absolutely loved
go.
it. Wonderful memories of those books. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And you still you can still read those books nowadays. They still current, like they still funny.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a few of them that they are a little bit off time, but it's still like some of them they're really funny. I recently got a bunch of Archies, and it's still good.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so that looks like it's the end of the viewer questions today. So this has been an absolute privilege, Alfonso. This has been a really wonderful interview, really fun, and I want to thank you for sparing the time for me today. I really do appreciate it. And thank you, viewers, as well, for the wonderful questions, for engaging with us. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, it's always fun to have another comic book creator. Now, one of these days, you gotta come to my thing, to my show.
Yeah, absolutely. Once the pandemic's over, once they start doing shows again, I'm hoping to come and visit you in Kitchener and just really shoot the breeze with you.
Yes, yes,
Oh, and my
yes.
my mum's
That
just
would be
commented.
super awesome. Oh yeah.
Yeah, my mum's just commented and said, "Brilliant interview." Thanks, mum. Really appreciate that.
Thank
Uh,
you, mom. To my
awesome.
mom watching in Mexico. Hola, mamá. Si me estás viendo, todavía estás en México, mamá, papá, familia.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And like I say, links to all of Alfonso's work are in the description of the live video. And you can also watch Heroes Manufactured on Amazon's Prime Video. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Like, share, subscribe.